Do you remember when we were young and we had to be someplace and it was probably our first vehicle? Money was scarce. We were driving these big cars, usually an 8-cylinder Chevy Impala or something like that. And we had a quarter of a tank of fuel to get there. And we didn't have money to put into the tank. And if we did, it would be $2, $5 was a luxury. And we were always concerned whether or not on a quarter of a tank of fuel, can we get to college? Can we get to university? Can we get to our first job? Can we get to pick up our first date? And how many times did a quarter of a tank of fuel last us to the point where it got us to our destination and got us back safely? Well, that happened to me a lot. And I was always amazed on how far I could actually go on a quarter of a tank of fuel. Folks, we have about a quarter of a tank of fuel left in us. So when you remember back how far you got in that old 69 Chevy Impala, you might have a quarter of a tank of fuel. So in other words, a quarter of a life left. Depending on how old we are, but in and around that range. Why do us as seniors think sometimes that we don't have the capability to go too far? So in this video, I'm going to explain why I do believe that at the age of 64, that I'm living the best years of my life. So let's start with many of us at this age, our circle is smaller, right? We have less friends. Our kids are probably grown and moved out of the house, or if not, they're well on their way and they don't really need us on a day-to-day basis. And for many of us, sadly, our parents have deceased, or our siblings for that matter. So the stress of looking after aging parents, many of us have already been through that. And we don't have that, as much as we would like them with us still, of course, we no longer have that responsibility of looking after aging parents, and we don't have the responsibility of raising children. When I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s, I was terrified of dying. Now, I knew I was going to die someday, but in the back of my mind, I still thought, that's never going to happen to me. But realistically, of course, I knew, I was smart enough to know that at some point I would die, but I was scared to die. And the main reason for that was my kids were still at home. My kids were with me. And if I died, what was going to happen to my kids? Who was going to raise them? What resources would they have? Now that my kids are older and grown and they're on their own, of course they're going to miss me. I'm no longer afraid of leaving them. So I don't have that stress of being terrified to die because knowing what's going to happen to my kids. I no longer have that stress of having to look after my parents as they get older. Again, I would trade anything to have my mother and father with me. And it's now time, as a senior, as a boomer in my case, as a warrior, to have made it this far. It is now my time to live the best life that I can live. So how do I plan to be like that Chevy Impala and get to my destination and back comfortably and safely? That kind of goes to the lifestyle that I speak so much about this channel. And if we haven't started yet in our 60s, hopefully we have started earlier in our 50s. In my case, it was in my late 50s for what I'm going to speak about. But that's our health and our lifestyles. And that is something that we do have control of. So whether you're on a medication and you want to reduce that or avoid going on medications, or if you have an ailment like such as type 2 diabetes and you want to try to make that better, the lifestyle that we choose now is what's going to get us that quarter of a tank of fuel. And by lifestyles, what I always speak about is stress management, quality sleep, movement, and even if it's just a 15-minute walk a day, just movement, and diet and nutrition. And by diet and nutrition, I usually refer to eating a whole food diet. I eat a strong ketogenic diet, borderline carnivore, but that's just me. Anybody that eats a whole food diet. So those are the things that we have to do now in order to get this quarter of a tank to last us until we get much, much later in life. And it's not just the years we want to last, it is the quality of the years, right? I think they call them go-go years now. So many of us are retired. I'm not there yet. I'm 64. I'm not retired, but I love my job and it keeps me and gives me a sense of purpose. We all need a sense of purpose. But everything's going to get smaller for us. We're going to have more aches and pains. We're never going to look like we did 30 years ago. People are going to see us as invisible because what does that old man have to offer? But we know better and we can control what we know. So just to wind down, that's what my channel is about. I use that metaphor as a vehicle with a quarter of a tank of fuel left, because essentially that's what we have left in us is a quarter of a tank. So let's make that last quarter of a tank great. And my channel is based on how to enhance our last quarter of life by living a better lifestyle. So if you like my channel and you want to subscribe, please do, or like this video. Or if you have any comments or questions or suggestions, I would definitely read those. And I want to make this channel. I'm not doing this, to make money or sponsorship or anything like that. Of course, I'm just doing it because it gives me some purpose, and I'm hoping by doing this that I can also maybe help others. So thanks again. See you soon.